Hey, do you like this build? Stick to the end and figure out how you can get your hands on it. This is Bread. Bread is a fellow Wavetech member and makes some of the most insane raid farms in the game. Recently, Mr. Bread reached out to me saying he's been wanting to make a new raid farm on Wavetech, and it could use some fancy dancy decoration. I couldn't say no, so I hopped onto the Wavetech copy server to check it out and... You know what? Maybe I can say no. Oh, okay, yeah, this is much better. Yeah, I can work with this. It's time to make this raid farm look better than ever. Bread makes amazing farms and some amazing content, so I have to do this justice. I'm pretty pleased with the end result. In fact, it might be my new favorite build out of anything I have ever made. So let's waste no time and hop right into my first attempt at a Japanese themed build. First thing to do was to change up the farm and replace every block with white concrete. The reason for this is a little tedious to explain, so I'll explain why later. But for now, let's check out the pallets I made for this build. Recently I've been using the same 5-ish blocks with every build I make, so in order to change it up, I wanted this decoration to have a wide range of different pallets to choose from. I spent more time on this than I care to admit, but I think the various pallets portrayed are going to not only be useful in this build, but for many future builds as well. Next, it was time to work on the actual structure. As always, I wanted to establish the shape of the build first, using andesite as a placeholder block for stone textures, and different types of concrete for various colors of buildings. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this build is going to be very chaotic, and we use almost every one of those pallets I designed earlier. The structure as a whole is a large tower with smaller structures scattered around its base, and as it gets higher, the top opens up to multiple platforms with larger buildings. For the roofs, I decided not to go with mansard as I have recently been doing a lot, instead opting for both Yosemune and Iramoya roofs. Despite me probably butchering the pronunciation, I think they blended together really well. I wanted this build to be almost steampunk, but I also decided to wait until the end to decorate it with antennas and pipes and chimneys. When I was more or less pleased with the structure, I wrapped up the night by planning what I would do the following day. Day 2 started with the final touches on the structure of the build. I added extra buildings on the bottom and a few additional arches. I only made one the day before, and I think the arches added a lot. But after I added a few more structures, it was finally time to get started on texturing. Now, I made one of the most insane palettes I have ever conceived for the gradients in this build, and you can see me start right here. It's a gradient from gray wool to the top texture of basalt, to the top texture of polished basalt, to dead fire coral, to the mix of stone and andesite. If you don't know, natural and polished basalt have different textures on their top than they do on their sides, and by rotating them, we can have a more visually pleasant gradient. The time-lapse you're watching has full bright turned on. That means that every surface is equal brightness. Keep that in mind as we progress. All the shadows you see are physically, time-consumingly hand-built. It's one of the most crazy things I've ever endeavored to try. It was hard to get the exact pattern of where and how I worked when it came to making these shaded spots, but I decided it would be best to shade all the stone prior to moving on to the houses and the colors. This took an embarrassing amount of time to do, so let's speed through that and start texturing each of the houses. I started with the orange homes, and with your permission, I won't explain the palettes for each of the houses because I changed it up a lot. After decorating each of the orange homes, I moved on to the green ones. Then from green to purple, then to red, and then lastly blue and cyan. Almost every house you see here has a unique gradient, something I'll show off when we take a closer look in the world. You'll notice that as I detailed the colors of each building, I also added to their trim, including fences, logs, and trapdoor static. It makes the build appear more busy and adds a lot in my humble opinion. Next up was the windows, and here I struggled more than I care to admit. I wanted to have rectangular box type of windows for the houses, but wanted to be able to make variations easily on different houses. I ended up opting for a mix between scaffolding, birch trapdoors, and stripped birch logs to create these windows. In some houses, I had the trapdoor set back a block, allowing for a small flower pot on the windowsill, while other houses I used the trapdoor set into the wall to allow for depth but minimum visual static. I showed that light can travel through opaque wall blocks in last week's video, but to light up these windows, I installed shroom lights behind the trapdoors. Trapdoors can allow light through them even when they're closed, and although gamma override makes it so we don't see a difference right now, it should really pack a punch when we apply shaders later on. As I created the windows for each building, I also added some extra decoration. I made a small garden using flowering azalea and added a thicker trim to the windows on the building that has smokestacks. I figured that because of the industrial aspect of that one blue building, it might be wise to add a little more variation to its aesthetic. Speaking of industrial aesthetics, that was the last key to this puzzle. I decided to add pipes in the form of polished basalt and polished deep slate stairs, copper and lightning rods, and the likes. I also added a ton of antennas using a ton of different techniques I came up with on the fly. I'll be sure to give them a closer look after this time lapse. Another thing of interest is these chimneys I added. There's two types, but my favorite is polished deep slate walls with wither skulls on top. And I know that's kind of crazy. Wither skulls, really? But yes, I found that if you point them into each other so that only the darker side is facing out, it makes a really nice chimney top that's been dirtied with years of soot. I personally think it looks fantastic, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Adding all of these chimneys and antennas and pipes were the last step I had in making this build. So now, let's go take a closer look in game. Hey, did I sound quiet in that time lapse to you? I feel like I sounded kind of quiet, but well, regardless, let's take a look at this build. And honestly, guys, I'm not gonna hold back. This is my new favorite build that I've ever made. The fish farm has been beaten. We now have the raid farm. There are so many little things that I would love to talk about that I brought up in the time lapse and didn't really look too closely at. So for an example, I mentioned those cool chimneys that I really liked. These little ones right here with the little wither skulls on top. I don't know. Second glance, they don't really work, but like I still really like that aesthetic. These antennas, I really liked the various things I did. I used chains, iron bars, and panes, glass panes, you know? Kind of an interesting combination with little candles on top, because sometimes old-fashioned antennas had that little ball on the end. I don't really know what it's for, but I really liked it. I also added other redstone components, such as these levers, observers, anvils. That's not really redstone, but we're not going to talk about it. Something else I didn't really bring up is I added a teeny bit of extra depth in the form of walls. Those are andesite walls being set back inside of the wall of stone, and I think that adds a nice little eroded look. My gosh, these gradients. I played around with so many different gradients, and I have never used this much glazed terracotta. It's kind of exciting, honestly, using some yellow. Down here we have purples. I think that the green one, I actually didn't use any glazed terracotta, but like I said, almost all of these have their own special gradients. The weirdest building with the weirdest gradient is this one. Not sure I'm gonna keep it. But as you can see, it goes from beehives to bee nests to raw gold to blocks of gold. What a weird gradient, but it kind of works. The bottoms of these bee nests has the same texture, or close to the same color as these beehives, and then the top of these bee nests is very similar to the raw gold, so it kind of creates a really weird gradient. I'm not exactly sure if I'm sold on it yet, but hey, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I suppose the last thing that we could talk about is this little trolley right here. If you didn't know, which I assume you didn't because I didn't really bring it up, this chain is just a few blocks below sea level. Now, why is that important? Well, in the perimeter, that means that this chain we could just run all the way to the end of the perimeter, and it kind of connected to the side, which would look pretty cool. And I also added this little trolley, this little cart. It's very cute, using some of these grindstones, looking like they're connected to the chains. And of course, it is spawn-proofed. Why? Because, well, there might be a mob that spawns right on this block only, and we use some glow lichen to create a very light amount of light, and that will help keep everything at bay. This hopper right here, this is funny, it's actually powered, so it has minimal lag. And also, that happens up here. You might have saw that there was like a hopper here. Well, it's powered. What about this hopper? Oh, it's powered. You see? Very cool. We're being very conscious. I mentioned that I turned the farm to white concrete, and I don't know if anyone still remembers I said that, but all aspects of the farm are actually white concrete. If I turn on gamma override, everything that's the farm is white concrete. Do you know what this deco does not use despite all of its gradients? White concrete, that is correct. So if we take something like this is our farm right here. And I know for a fact that this layer right here is white stained glass. If I take this white stained glass and I'll remove that corner. And now I can type replace white concrete with air. Now the entire farm is gone, but it will still be lined up using this one glass block, which means that when we're looking at a material list for this build, we won't have all the materials for the farm itself, something that I have accidentally done countless times. But now there's no farm in here, so it's going to be hopefully a lot easier to build. And I suppose the second, or no, not the second, the last thing entirely, oh gosh, I'm so excited, is to look at this build with shaders on. So here is without shaders, and here is the final product with shaders. I'm pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked with how this turned out. Ooh, the fog at the bottom is really nifty. You know, I goof it up for the camera a little bit, but it's very rare that I'm this stoked about a build I've made. And this one turned out well. I'm pretty proud of it. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Feel free to drop a comment. I would love to hear it. I do think that there might be a few changes I add to this. Maybe add a dock to the bottom. Maybe add some more pipes. I don't know. I would love to hear your feedback. But I think that is all for right now. And I think what we should do is give Bread a little bit of a sneak peek, see what he thinks about it. Hopefully he's as stoked as I am. So without further ado, let's go check that out. I have since sent screenshots to Bread. He has responded. A little drum roll, please. Hey, we did it. Cool. We got a seal of approval. We got the green light. Now we can build this. Oh my gosh, we have to collect an entire shulker box of dead fire coral. While I think of how stressful that is going to be, let's jump right into today's questions. Today's first question is from TryandViz, asking if I could make a tutorial on the world edit and Lightmatica features that I use the most. I think this is a fantastic idea, and I would be happy to make a video. But first, I think I'd like some more feedback from y'all. Is that a sort of video you would enjoy watching? What sorts of things would you hope to learn? The more feedback I get, the more in depth I can go, so feel free to comment literally anything. Today's second question is from Spring, asking my opinion on Mandrilla Sphinx. Monkey. Today's third and final question is from That Potato Star System, asking what are my goals after 1K subs? Firstly, always happy to see you sticking around, man, and secondly, you know, I've thought a lot about this in the past few days, and I can think of plans and series ideas, but goals is kind of a funny word. Apart from getting my channel monetized by the end of summer, I really don't have a ton of goals, so let's make one up. Let's say long-term goal, joining Hermitcraft. That should be easy, right? Okay, but actually I should maybe start thinking of other goals. I never thought I'd make it to 1K subs, and here we are, so maybe I can actually do something if I set my sights. And as always, if you would like to see a question of yours featured in a video, feel free to leave a comment down below for a chance to be featured in next week's video. I'm sorry, but wasn't that shulker box reveal kind of freaking cool? Like, super impractical perimeter decoration, but holy smokes, that looked so cool. Also, yeah, I don't know if you saw, but I passed 1,000 subscribers. Huge milestone, calls for a huge celebration. If you don't know, I was planning on releasing another free schematic at 1,000 subscribers, but I haven't decided which schematic yet. I'll make a decision and include a link in next Monday's video. There are two other schematics potentially up for grabs though. Firstly, this here is WaveTech's sheep farm decoration. It was the first large structure I made on Wave and is also the most heavily requested. And now you can have this schematic to build. Slight catch, I was planning on releasing this build if I can receive a YouTube partnership by September 15th, 2022. The only requirement now to get said partnership is watch time. So if you want this massive building, make sure you stay up to date on my vids, like, comment, sub for the almighty algorithm, and potentially share my channel with your friends. If you haven't noticed, I am now releasing a hardcore series on Saturdays along with my WaveTech videos on Monday. They're a little on the longer side and a very different style than what you see here, but I've been having a lot of fun in the series and sure would appreciate it if you wanted to check those videos out. I'd really appreciate it if you wanted to help my channel out and help me get to my goal, and I would be happy to share my thanks in the form of this sheep farm build. The second large schematic up for grabs is this build, Lake Town. If you want to see the creative process behind how I designed this and how me and my team built it in survival in record time, feel free to check out that video, link in the top right, and stick to the end to figure out how you could get your hands on it. It's that time again, everyone. This video is over, go watch another.